Welcome back. I feel like I made a quick change. I'm out of presenting mode and into MC mode again. I'm noticing two things. One is you guys are becoming very well trained on this. When we first did this, the first time, remember, we were testing the app? It was chaos. We couldn't get you. Now you're doing it. So thank you for that. That helps us keep on schedule. And I'm actually seeing more and more people sitting up there. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but... Okay, so we're going to continue on with our program. When we sort of saw this, this was one, I guess you could say I circled them all, but I looked at this session, I said, this is going to be great, right? So, and the session, as you can see, is the power of corporate citizenship to create positive business, and it's really around the role of philanthropy has played in shaping and reinforcing Microsoft's cultural value. And I'm going to skip a lot of things about Mary because she's amazing, and you can read about it in her bio. She's been at Microsoft a long time. She's the first female attorney. A very important fact that we want to highlight, she's a UMich grad, though. Yeah, all right. So you should be wearing blue, right? You sure it should be wearing blue, but that's okay. And then I had to elicit a surprising fact. So if you ever have me introduce you, I may try and elicit a surprising fact. So she's also pursuing an encore career in surfing.
Once.
She's going to get me for that, right?
Yeah.
Let's welcome Mary. Come on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for the warm welcome. I'm very much looking forward to talking with you today about philanthropy and the role that it plays in positive impact in business. And in order to do that, let me first sort of set the context about why this is so important. You probably have heard from many of the speakers today that we are at the dawn of a new industrial revolution. And this is sometimes called the fourth industrial revolution, the age of information, or the age of big data. So if we were to learn a little bit more about this, it's sometimes important to also go back in time, just a brief refresher of why these revolutions are so important. The first industrial revolution was really marked by the building of a steam engine. And with the steam engine came the ability to do lots of things in business and manufacturing. And it was the first time that a machine went faster than a horse. In my era, growing up, I remember my grandfather telling me about having a huge metal carton with his, it wasn't a carton, it was steel, with his name on it. And he filled it with milk every morning. He put it on the train to market, and it came back. So it enabled him, as a solo farmer, to conduct business better as well. The second industrial revolution, electricity, heat, very, very clear benefits for business, manufacturing, production processes, and very clear benefits for homes as well. You could heat your house. You could read a book after dark without really damaging your eyes. Lots and lots of great benefits for both business and for people. The third industrial revolution, the PC. And of course, business just became more productive, more efficient, but consumers and people had a lot more access to information, to entertainment, the things that made their lives better too. But with the fourth industrial revolution, what we hear is that the scale coming is probably 10 times faster, and because of globalization, 100 times broader than the previous industrial revolutions. So let's just take a look at what the fourth industrial revolution might look like. And those who study it are saying that there are probably three main things. The first set of changes will be physical. And the most obvious one of these that you're already hearing and talking about are autonomous vehicles and, of course, robots. And concern about robots bringing efficiencies, but also at the same time being disruptive. The second primary area is biological. The things that we can do with genetics, with research, with health, with testing, bring great promise, but at the same time, we have lots of concerns about ethics and about privacy that we'll need to work through. The third major area is in the area of digital. And we hear about the Internet of Things. You can't really almost read a newspaper or a media without hearing about the Internet of Things and the promise that it will bring. But we'll also have disruptive business models, and business will have to change very rapidly. So as we think about how this has happened in before, let me give you just a brief illustration. I'll take you back to the turn of the century. This is a street in New York, down on Lower Broadway, and this was the turn of the century. You can see that there's lots of commerce going on. There's people on the streets. They're being largely, and business is being conducted, goods are moved by means of horses. In fact, at this point in time, 25% of the agricultural output in the United States went to feed horses, primarily for this kind of supportive work. 20 years later, the same street corner, not a horse to be seen. That means all of those people engaged in that kind of agriculture and that sort of delivery service and those sorts of mechanical repairs of carriages, in shoeing horses and caring for horses, all that changed. People had to were disrupted and needed to adapt to find new ways to conduct business and to make a living. So as we then think about why is this important for us to talk about this, we understand that with opportunity does come challenges. Challenges to traditional jobs, the notions of what is private and what is not, particularly in the health areas. The issues of accessibility, particularly in emerging worlds, are huge. We know that people with significant disabilities are unemployed today at much, much, much higher rates. They are much more likely to live in poverty than those without disabilities. And we want to ensure that as we go forward in age of automation, that the gap narrows and not actually widens, because that is the concern. The same is true with questions of income inequality, and we heard some really great information from the previous panel on this topic. So why should Microsoft care? Why should big tech care? There's a pretty good reason why big tech should care. There are all the right reasons big tech should care, which I believe in, of course. But it is also true that people are looking more and more to big tech. We talked about cultural identities in the last session. People are looking more and more to big tech and saying, you are causing the income divide. You are causing the polarization between the very urban parts of the country and the rural parts of the country. And you, in fact, by innovation and autonomous vehicles and other kinds of things, are costing jobs. Robots are going to take my job, and what is big tech going to do about it? I just have a couple of examples of the kinds of articles that have just showed up, just actually in the last month. And the answer is that big tech does have a responsibility. Big tech does have an accountability for this work. In fact, the goal of the work that we do is to ensure that we can move people forward and technology forward without leaving people behind. The Microsoft mission stated, it comes in the front of virtually every speech, I didn't put it in today, is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And unless we address these issues of income inequality and job disruption at this particular inflection point in particular, we will come nowhere close to meeting the mission of the company. So it is important for us as we think about it. So when we think about the age of innovation, what are the key things that we will need to do in order that everyone can come along with us? One of the areas that we talk about is empowering people, and not surprisingly, empowering communities so that communities themselves can continue to empower people who live within the communities. And as we think about that, digital skills is an area where Microsoft we've been engaged for about 30 years in the work of digital skills. The work that we do covers everything from supporting nonprofits, doing programs, starting with kindergarten. How many of you, do you know about the Hour of Code? How many of you have done the Hour of Code? A few people have done the Hour of Code. We have a great partnership with Code.org, which uses the game of Minecraft and Frozen from Disney to take an hour to teach anybody how to write a line of code. And truly, no, you can do it. You can download it. Truly, you can do it. We start with that. We have curriculum going forward, and then all the way up to programs where Microsoft volunteers teach computer science in high schools with the goal to both build teacher capacity, to encourage young people for careers in computer science, but most importantly, When you learn these kinds of science and STEM skills, you learn critical thinking, you learn adaptive thinking, and you learn how to solve problems. And that will set you in good stead whether you are a computer scientist or whether you are engaged in any other kind of a knowledge worker career or a technical career. When I was in grade school, of course, there was no computer science, but I think back to, I went to a Catholic grade school and was taught by nuns, and I think back to the rigor with which Sister Cletus taught me how to diagram a sentence. And that same notion of critical thinking is not that different than computational thinking. In fact, I wish I had figured it out long before. I spent the 25 years at Microsoft learning about engineering and science from my role on the lawyer side. But let me show you just a little bit about one of the programs that we started 7 or 8 years ago. We'd love many more people to join us with this program, and in fact, 25% of the volunteers for this program are Microsoft engineers. 75% come from over 400 other companies. So let me tell you about the Microsoft Teals program, and we'll roll a video.
Get ready to wave when you come to Manson, because it's a friendly small town. You know each other and you take care of one another. Very caring community. But we have a lot of students that come from poverty.
Most people who live here think more of, do I work in the orchards? Do I work at Walmart? They see a future, but not really as bright as most people.
Trying to connect kids with teachers that have expertise in all the different things that students are interested in can be challenging. So the way we've beat that is to go outside of our schools.
Teals is a program sponsored by Microsoft that recruits, trains, and places volunteers from the tech industry in schools to teach computer science. My teaching team, we teach remotely using Skype for Business.
Are both classes there? Hi everyone, hi intro, hi AP team.
Teals is a really rare opportunity where, because you have this unique skill in computer science, you get to then directly teach younger kids.
I knew how to teach to students, but the computer science, that was where I really needed some training on. And so it's been great to be able to learn alongside the students.
Once a teacher's trained, that frees those volunteers so they can move on to another school, a school that does not have computer science, and we could start over and build yet a new program.
The Teals program has really brought a lot to the community. It's given kids opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
I recall 3 or 4 students that, under most circumstances, would not have gone to college. And just our classroom alone had sparked that interest such that they enrolled and were accepted into an engineering program.
I'm actually thinking about getting my medical degree. Also, I can come back here and run as a family business because it needs computer science.
That's what I love about Manson. It's so close that it's basically a family. And if I do stay in the community, the Teals classes would help me in every single position that we have here.
So this is the recruiting video for our Teals organization. I'm really pleased to tell you that one of the young men on my team is in Detroit today recruiting schools, and we hope that in the fall we'll have about 7 to 10 schools between Detroit and Ann Arbor where we'll be teaching Teals, and we'll be looking for volunteers. So if you have any interested people, talk to me afterwards. So we're very excited about this program. It helps to build teacher capacity. It teaches teacher capacity, it builds the computational thinking, and it also encourages students to take careers in computer science, which creates a positive impact for needs that we have for our own workforce. A second area in which we focus is beginning in the middle skills program. So if we've been working in digital skills for 25 years, I would say middle skills, we're probably just on day 2 or 3 in thinking about this. And you will see us over the next year invest more and more in workforce development programs for programs that are somewhere between high school and the college degree, a certificate program of some kind, very likely post-high school, likely in the area of advanced manufacturing, health healthcare, those kinds of areas where we know that there is absolutely a gap between the jobs that are open and the skills that a lot of people have. So we're just beginning this work. I do want to give you an example of a program that's been ongoing at Microsoft for a couple of years now that focuses on middle skills and outreach to veterans.
I grew up in a real small town. And then went to college and just kind of went wild. I wasn't ready for any of that. I gave college a shot 2 times. Both times I still just kind of messed all of it up. I didn't have any discipline, I guess. That's when I joined the Marine Corps. You learn how to lead as you go up through the ranks. After I was done with that, I kind of realized I'm ready to go to school now.
MSSSA, the Microsoft Software and Systems Academy, is an intensive 18-week program that trains active duty military and transitioning service members and veterans on technology. We have different learning paths. We have cybersecurity, we have cloud application development, we have server and cloud administration, and we even have database and business intelligence.
You're guaranteed an interview with Microsoft or affiliates. I thought it'd be a great way to slingshot me into the IT field. You go in the morning and you have your technical curriculum, and then the afternoon is the career development stuff. We had a mentor who called us every week, kind of sending us different jobs or whatever to look at. Mentor is Lee Marine, and that's actually his last name, and it's cool because he was a Marine. It made it fun, and it kind of took the stress part about the whole transition.
He would get flustered every once in a while because he really wanted to fully adapt to the professional atmosphere that we're trying to establish. The swearing went away and the stories got more refined. He put all of his effort into it. That metamorphosis during the time in MSSSA was amazing to now where he's a young professional doing his own things.
I got a job with CKE Restaurants. I'm the IT services supervisor.
Managing a small team right out of the gate, that's amazing.
MSSSA gave me the tools I needed to succeed and to land the job that I have now. I help people with whatever problems they have, and I also support franchisees and store owners. I thoroughly enjoy what I do. I'm a pretty simple guy. I have my dog. I like to fish. I'm living in the same area as my girlfriend. Within the next year, I'm gonna buy a house.
He has huge goals. I know that he'll achieve them.
I found my path. I'm happy where I'm at right now, but one day I'll be a CTO of a major company.
I love this video, and every time I see it, when I see the picture with his dog, I think he should have a 200-pound dog, and he's got this little dog up here that, I see a bow in the hair of the dog or something, which just means that, you can't make assumptions about people. So these areas of middle skills will also be very important as we move forward in terms of adaptive learning and as we go through the age of information, and not all jobs are college degree jobs. Most of them are high school jobs, though. In fact, virtually all of the jobs going forward are at least high school degree jobs with a certificate or something a little bit beyond that. The third area that we provide a lot of support in are the nonprofits themselves. And so we have a broad breadth program where we offer software licenses for free, both on premises and in the cloud, for those of you who know the difference between cloud and on-prem. And we increasingly have more and more donations in the cloud on Office 365 and increasingly Azure, and have strong marketing campaigns to encourage nonprofits to be efficient using technology. We know, though, that the big gap is that nonprofits, just like for-profits, need services and implementation support. So we are thinking about, in fact, more than thinking about, in the next months, we will be pulling together a nonprofit sales segment to sell only to nonprofits from within Microsoft Philanthropies, keeping the discounts really low, creating essentially a consolidated sales force that's focused particularly on the needs of nonprofits and focusing on building out that services ecosystem as well. A fourth area that I really am proud of is the employee giving history at Microsoft. Our employee giving program started with Bill Gates, started with Bill Gates' mother, telling him that this was an important thing to do. And when I started at Microsoft 27 or 8 years ago, the giving campaign was very vibrant, and it continues to be very vibrant today. Last year, Microsoft employees contributed $62 million, which the company matched for about $142 million. Thank you. That went to about 19,000 nonprofits around the country and around the world, so any 501c3. But what we are finding as time has gone on, that as important as this is to the community, it's also really important for retention and recruiting for our employees. We find that people come to Microsoft saying that they know about our employee giving program, and they know that it is one of the best around in terms of big tech. And we hope that we can help to curate micro-volunteering opportunities, skills-based volunteering, many different kinds of things so that employees can really have a purpose and associate that purpose with their time at Microsoft. So let me give you just a quick example of what our Employee Give program looks like now, about 30 years since the time I joined.
Our mission
is to empower every person, and every organization
on the planet
to achieve more.
to achieve more.
I don't know any other company that stresses giving the way Microsoft does.
The employee giving program is one of the reasons why I really enjoy working at Microsoft.
You gain a new superpower, and that power is to double your impact.
I'm a giver by nature, and allowing me to choose the cause that I want the company to support on my behalf is something that is truly beneficial.
I think it's a fun way to get involved with different initiatives that are happening across the company, meet other people in different areas, and still give a good lasting impact to the community.
I like the Giving Campaign because it's the one tool that is very unique to Microsoft to help people reach out to those communities and help them find resources that is often so challenging for nonprofits to get.
You can give time, talent, money, or products, and you can give in almost any way that's meaningful to you, and Microsoft will match it.
Literally match.
Matched by Microsoft.
So even if you only help for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, that time is matched by Microsoft at $25 an hour, which is an amazing rate.
It's a year-round program. Yes, we really push in October for an extended drive, but it's open year-round. Start searching for causes you care about, or if you know of a cause you care about, or you can nominate a cause you care about.
It's easy at a tech company to get caught up in technology for technology's sake. And yet the point of technology is people. It's to make life better. And the Giving Campaign reminds us about what it's all about.
The culture itself is very much philanthropic. This is really an opportunity to see Microsoft at its full glory.
The campaign is just a beautiful showcase of how much it actually means to everyone at the organization. It's not just a part of our benefits package, it's a part of our culture here in the company.
So that's a really fun time of year when we have the month period of time. My team curates about 150 events over that period of the month. Everything from karaoke to poker to auction to 5K runs to wiping clean machines for donation, just a huge variety of things. And you saw the t-shirts, so the swag is actually quite coveted over the course of the year. I have to say that I sometimes say that one of my biggest accomplishments in my first year in this role was to ensure that we had V-neck t-shirts for women for the gift campaign. That was like, the women really did appreciate that. So I want to also tell you a little bit about a final thing that we think about with the work we do and other corporations do. So Microsoft Philanthropies is part of the company. It's not a separate foundation. And we very deliberately decided to structure it that way so that we could engage our employees side by side with us in the work and integrate it, that we could talk about our product and our technologies, which we think are very beneficial in the nonprofit world, and because we could advocate without worrying about tax status and those sorts of things. So we use our voice both in social media and what's called social good marketing. Many of you may have seen something called the Make What's Next campaign that premiered on International Women's Day that encourages young girls to stay in STEM past that 5th grade or 6th grade where many young girls drop out of STEM, but also to advocate for things like education reform, which we know are really, really important. And we actually believe that the time for corporations to be apolitical is really waning, particularly in this time. The issues are just so interwoven together. And in fact, we'll see what the business professors in the audience think about this, but as we start to talk about it at Microsoft, you typically think about customers, employees, and shareholders in those orders of importance. But today, we at Microsoft are starting to say we need to be customer-focused, and today, more than any other time in which we've seen, employees want the company to take a stand on issues. Employees are more anxious than at any other time. In the United States, Microsoft, for example, has 11,000 employees on some form of a green card or a visa, with dependents and families with them. In our engineering group, it's almost 20% of the employees in our engineering group. So the issues of the day are important to our employees. And then to support broader society. And we believe when you do those 3 things, then the shareholders will believe in you and come. So we're starting to flip how we think about that work. And let me just give you some examples of some of the things that we've done in the last year, joined by others. We have been very outspoken on the immigration ban. Not only were we outspoken in helping to create the coalition of other tech companies to talk about the reasons why the ban makes no sense and frankly was probably unconstitutional, but we mobilized our our HR department to actually go to the borders where we had 15 employees and their families trying to come back, sending our own lawyers to meet our employees at the border to ensure that they got back in from their travels. These are the kinds of things more and more that, frankly, our own employees are expecting from us. In addition, the issue of digital divide, we've talked about income inequality being very important. We all know that in the world, about 60% of the population still does not have internet access. What we don't really realize is that there are about 40 million people in the United States who don't have internet at all, and another, up to this quarter, internet is available, but they do not have the means to access it themselves. So they're going to the public library or they're going to some other government spot in order to access the internet, as opposed to the ubiquitous, affordable internet access that's needed. That gets you into some pretty tricky political territory when you talk about those kinds of issues. And we've been piloting programs called TV White Spaces, which we think provide high-quality internet at a much lower cost. And again, get you into some tricky territories. We're never going to be a telecom provider, ever. But piloting these kinds of programs to demonstrate that there is technology and there is innovation out there is really important. A third area that I just would highlight is being involved in your community. So Microsoft is one of the largest employers in Washington State. You might expect that we'd be involved in the community, but I think we've really been leading on some issues that you wouldn't expect us to. And again, it is largely, not largely, a lot because our employees ask us to. So recently, we came out with a 5-pronged strategy for the last legislative session. One of the things that surprised most people who read about it was a focus in Washington State by Microsoft on race and justice reform. And the goal there is to work with law enforcement and other agencies to help bring more analytical rigor to data analysis to see if we could get insights and trends that would enable us to essentially convene more thought leadership on this issue and potentially as well to provide better training methods and methodologies from those in law enforcement. Not an issue that you would normally think big tech would be engaged with, but it is an issue that our employees, in essence, asked us to become engaged with. So, not surprisingly, this is all a partnership. No one company can do it, no one nonprofit can do it, no one business school can do it, no one visionary leader can do it. It takes a lot of people working together, aligning towards the same goals. And so I hope with this session today, you've had some understanding about how Microsoft and big tech and how business is starting to think differently about positive social impact as being a critical element of the way that it does business. And thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions. Okay. Now, magically, questions are supposed to appear on the screen right in front of me. You might want to. Okay. Now, the question is magically, can I read them without my glasses? Okay. Okay, let's see. The question is, what's the impact of engaging in philanthropic efforts on your own employees? I talked a little bit about this. So I think our employees have really, they love our employee giving program. And it's actually, it's viewed as an employee perk, actually, because you can double your impact and you can pick Doctors Without Borders, or you can, pick the local school, nonprofit school next to you. And we support all of that. So that really is important. But at the same time, our employees today associate the work that we do far more with the Give campaign than they do the variety of other things that I've just described to you. So this year, for the first time, we put out an impact letter, and it went to all employees. It had an open, we get a zillion emails, you might imagine, at Microsoft. It had an open rate of 77%. And it had a read rate, meaning people stayed on it for longer than the 1 or 2 seconds, of about 50–60%. One of the highest open rates and read rates of any email that's sent, in the company from HR or legal department and that sort of thing. So we know employees are paying attention to it. And we do believe that the age of the, employees who want to work for a purpose is really with us. Microsoft employees, we think about it, at least I think about it. You make a choice to work at Microsoft, and you work hard, but you make a choice because you can work at other places. So we really want to recruit our employees, and we do think that the work that we do in this area and the opportunities that we give employees to volunteer among a wide variety of things makes a difference. One of the most popular employee volunteering program is one done with the Red Cross, and it's been going on for about 3 years. And once a week, the Red Cross comes, and anybody who wants to can come to the session. It's about an hour long. And they have large satellite maps. And essentially what our employees do is go from the satellite maps and then digitize, here's where the energy station is, here's where it looks like there's a school, here's where it looks like this building is a hospital, so that when first responders come, the area is already mapped. Red Cross loves it. Our employees love doing it. And those are the kinds of things that we actually need to talk about, I think, a lot more among our own employee base. Now, okay, this is an interesting question. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced along the way? Okay, Is this in life or is this in my job? Some of you know that, well, most of you know that I actually was a lawyer for 29 years. You might think I miss being a lawyer, you know, that I miss those indemnification agreements and, you know, that I miss thinking about secondary liability and copyright law. No, actually, I don't miss it at all. And it's not a challenge, but I do find one of the great benefits of this job is that people give you a lot more hugs than they ever did when I was a lawyer. And I can really literally meet somebody and, you know, they hug me when I meet them, you know, which never happened when I went into a business negotiation. So I needed to change my style a little bit, you know, as I went into this work. I've even gotten to the point where I tell my husband, I understand what parts of the country you're from the hug that you give me, you know, because there's like the Midwest hug, you know, that's like the two-pat lean-over hug, you know, come from the South, you know, that's a big hug. But so I really, you know, you can tell I love my job, but I did have to, you know, sort of gear it down in a number of ways as I headed into the work, building a lot more consensus, bringing people along in a much different way than you think about. Some of the arts of negotiation are the same. Some of them are the same. In terms of what the corporate challenges are, you know, I really feel like I am running a business, an end-to-end business. And I am accountable, and I have a board of directors, and it's Satya Nadella and the people who work directly for Satya Nadella. And I'm kind of in a bad spot in that I only have one source of revenue right now, and that's Satya Nadella and the execs who report to him. So I feel like I need to really be accountable, you know, every day to drive impact, and to not only show impact on the 4 pillars that I talked about, but to help actually tie them to positive business impact. One of the reasons why we want to develop a nonprofit sales segment, quite honestly, is so that we can develop a bit of a revenue stream so that I can continue to invest and grow the work that we do in Philanthropies. I hope to have some really great hero showcase examples of how nonprofits are using our technology to do great good in the world. And at the same time, I'm essentially becoming a bit of a social enterprise within Microsoft with the work that we do there. So for me, for the next year, that is going to be an interesting challenge. Another challenge that I think anybody who does this work does is kind of separating the question of what makes you really feel good from the question of what you can scale at a systems level to make change. And I'll just give you an example. We've been more and more engaged in humanitarian work. A number of companies have as a result of the Syrian refugee crisis. We all know that the number of displaced persons, I think the UN is just going to change the number from 65 million to 67 million upcoming. 5 or so million of them are Syrian refugees. That's where most of the media coverage is today, but it's not even close to where most of the problem is. We've become more engaged in that work, but you realize the magnitude of it, and you realize, you know, what do you do to make an impact? And what you want to do is exactly what I did, and you have to do it because it keeps you wanting to do your job. What you want to do is go visit the camps and talk to a refugee and see how you can make a difference. And I did that a month or so ago. I visited a camp in Greece and 2 camps in Jordan and spent a week there and talked to refugees and saw the hope, really, and the persistence. And it was really wonderful to get me to do the work that I know we really need to do, which is to build the infrastructure of the very large and very capable NGOs and nonprofits who can scale the work and to work through them. And that's not the thing you want to do, because you just want to go right there yourself. And again, that's good for you. It's not necessarily good for creating the systems impact you want. You do have to do both. And one of the sessions I attended this morning talked about finding 3 points of gratitude over the course of your day. And I can always find in this work a point of gratitude, but I always know that I need to link it up to, you know, a systems level change, and working always towards that systems level change. Okay, let's see. To what extent are philanthropic efforts impacted by Microsoft's business ups and downs? What's the level of commitment? This is an interesting question. We have had, obviously, our philanthropy program from the beginning. I would say until about 10 years ago, most of the focus was on the Give campaign, and that has been supported all along. Even as more and more employees, have come to the company, we've continued to expand the match and that sort of thing. That was something that Bill Gates cared a lot about. I would say that the purpose question is something that Satya cares about deeply and philosophically. And I don't know if any of you had a chance to listen to Satya Nadella speak or hear much about his background, but when you grow up in an emerging market country, as he did in India, and when you grow up in a country that has just recently been ruled by what they would say would be a colonialist power, you come to a CEO job with a different worldview. I mean, you just do. And I think that he really believes in the business impact of the work that we do, and he thinks about, for himself as a CEO, how he uses the company as a platform for a positive legacy. And I've heard him say this, in gatherings, and I like to think that culture change from Satya will mean that we continue this investment in philanthropy. I know we'll continue the investment in philanthropy. It has not wavered over the course in time. Does that mean one year there might be $10 million less in an area? Yeah, of course, because again, I do have the one donor. But is it a deep-seated part of who we are as from the 30 years of giving? And I think from our CEO, I actually think it is. And I think it can be positively for any company. I see I'm being, yeah. Okay, yanked. All right. Thanks, everybody. It was great to talk with you.
So much. I have a question for you, though. If I give you a hug, can you tell me where I'm from?
Okay, let me close my eyes.
What?
You're not from the Midwest. I'd say East Coast.
She wins. Yeah, I grew up in the East Coast in Connecticut.
Yay!
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. I know what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, it is my turn to invite the next panel to come up. And I am so excited about this panel. This panel has been, actually this session we've wanted to have actually for multiple of our conferences. So we got it together, and thanks to my wonderful colleague, Jerry Davis, it's with us this year. And I think all of us in this room have so much to learn from Detroit and from the experience in Detroit. I'm going to introduce Jerry and let Jerry introduce the panel members. I didn't need any notes to introduce my wonderful colleague, Jerry Davis. He is on the faculty with me in the management and organizations area. You need to know that he's one of the top organizational researchers and theorists in the world. I think Michigan considers themselves very lucky to have him. He's also known for his talents, his leadership talents in bringing people together. He headed the interdisciplinary community of org scholars for the last decade at the University of Michigan, and he's becoming known as Mr. Detroit. He loves everything to do with Detroit, and I think it's a real gift that he's pulled this panel together. He's also known for great ties, a great Italian tie. So I'll turn it over to Jerry, but in advance, thank you all for being here.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for being here on this Thursday afternoon. I am also super excited about this panel and getting to meet these four folks and speak with them. So in my opinion, Detroit is the most exciting, intriguing, and complicated city in America. Has a long connection to the University of Michigan, as some of you in the room know. The University of Michigan was founded exactly 200 years ago in Detroit in 1817. So we're celebrating that bicentennial right now. So let me ask by a show of hands, how many people have been in Detroit in the last month? Oh, pretty good. For the rest of you, I'm going to tell you that this panel is going to cure that. You're going to be in Detroit. By the end of this hour, you're going to want to move to Detroit, start a business in Detroit, and invest in a business in Detroit. So that's how I'm setting my aspiration for this panel. If you don't know a lot about Detroit, I'm going to give you the 1-minute overview. Detroit gave us the Model T, Motown, and the MC5. Mass production, Jay Dilla and the White Stripes, and it gave us techno. Sorry about that. But it brings the German tourists, so I guess there's some benefit to it. The thing about Detroit is very strongly identified with one industry, which is the auto industry. And in the business school world, we'd say that's a high beta strategy, meaning when the industry was booming, the city was super booming. And when the industry retrenched, the city retrenched. This panel is about what comes next. How do business, government, nonprofits, entrepreneurs, community leaders, and citizens work together to create a more vibrant future that's inclusive for everybody in the city of Detroit? We got a great set of panelists here. They bring experiences from all of these different sectors, often 2, 3, 4 at once for some of the panelists. And they're going to share their stories and insights about how purpose, partnership, and community focus make great things happen in Detroit. So the plan for the panel is that I'm going to introduce each panelist. They're going to take about 2 to 5 minutes to give a brief overview of their journey. Then we're going to have a dialogue about a set of questions we've thought about in advance. We only have an hour, but the panelists have agreed to stick around and hang out with you and answer your questions when we get to the end. And I think you're going to enjoy this as much as I do. So first, I want to introduce Jerry Norcia. He's the president and COO of DTE Energy. DTE, as you know, has been serving Detroit for over 150 years. It's an anchor institution in the business world through thick and thin. They didn't move to Dallas. Sorry. Sorry. Jerry's responsible for strategic oversight and operation of DTE's electric and gas businesses, their major enterprise projects and customer service. He's been at DTE since 2002 and currently serves on the boards of the Skillman Foundation, Invest Detroit, and St. Joseph's Mercy Health System.
Great. Well, thanks, Jerry. You talked about loving Detroit. And DT Energy has been loving Detroit since 1849, and we continue to love it today, and I would say that it even in a deeper way. So we talk about purpose. Our purpose is, our opening statement for purpose is that we serve with our energy. And when we talk about serving with our energy, we're really first talking about serving with the energy of our employees. So it has a double meaning for us. And so without our employees, we're not able to serve. And then when you think about our traditional products, we serve with natural gas, we serve with electricity, which really has become and continues to be the foundation of progress in the communities where we live and serve. As I mentioned, we started that with a gas company in 1849, and it's an interesting history. The opening chapter of the gas company in Detroit, at that time it was called the Detroit Gas Company, was that we were going to light the dangerous streets of Detroit. And we did that with gas lamps starting in 1849. And here we are in the turn of the century doing it again, but this time with LED lights, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we continue to be heavily interwoven with the community. So when we talk about our purpose and how it interweaves with the community, we can't see our success without the success of the community. And without the success of our employees. And I think as we generate success for our employees and our communities and our customers with our traditional products and services, I think we end up being a very successful company, which we feel we are today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So next I'd like to introduce one of my personal heroes. Sorry to embarrass you, but this is Sue Mosey. She's the executive director of Midtown Detroit, Inc. for the past 29 years. MDI does community development, marketing, real estate, small business development, and arts programming in Midtown. And it's played a really central role in making Midtown Detroit an incredibly vibrant, fantastic neighborhood. I say this as someone who bought a loft there 4 years ago. ago because Detroit was so cool. She's also an entrepreneur, and I have to say, this is going to sound like Kellyanne Conway, so sorry about this. But if you haven't stayed at the Inn on Ferry Street yet in Detroit, it's amazing. It's the world's best bed and breakfast. So she's got the perspective of an entrepreneur, someone who's been in Detroit through thick and thin for the last 40 years, and she can tell you a little bit about her story.
Thank you very much. So our organization is a nonprofit planning and economic development agency for actually 3 districts, Midtown, Techtown, and New Center. So those are the 3 districts right up the Woodward Corridor where the Q line actually is launching this weekend. Detroit's first real transit development. And we have been very active in a variety of different ways in the neighborhood. So everything from just basic community building activities, big urban gardens, dog parks, community spaces, placemaking, two-way conversions, all kinds of streetscape and greenway enhancements throughout the neighborhood. We do a lot of converting of historic properties, like we're really committed to our unique building stock. And as mentioned, we converted a whole block of properties into a small boutique inn about 15 years ago. Since then, we've saved many apartment buildings in the neighborhood that were scheduled for demolition. We work with many other developers in the neighborhood, both our local small homegrown folks who just need information on market and how to get financed, and sometimes a partner, all the way up to the larger development companies that are now coming in 30 years later, understanding that a lot of value now has been built around the neighborhood. We're also involved in arts programming. We think that's an absolute critical part of the DNA of this neighborhood, which also includes all your major museums and symphony halls. And so, you know, that's kind of a centerpiece of the core culture of the neighborhood as well. We're committed a lot to the small business development. As many of you know, Detroit's putting a lot of energy and financial assistance in creating a really compelling and active ecosystem of small businesses, and creating micro districts within the city with driving local economies for local employment and just local placemaking. So we've been doing that for quite a number of years, I think pretty successfully. Certainly have a ton more work to do there, but with the advancement now of larger scale projects, of a much more engaged city government, of philanthropy that continues to stick with us over really our whole 30-year horizon, and many of our corporate partners like DTE, it's really finally making a difference in Detroit.
Yeah, fantastic, thank you. So our third speaker, or panelist, is Maurice Cox, and Maurice is a planning director for the city of Detroit. He's an urban designer, former mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia, which I think of as the Ann Arbor of Virginia. He's taught at Tulane, Syracuse, University of Virginia, and Harvard. He served as design director of the National Endowment for the Arts from 2007 to 2010. In 2013, he was named one of the most admired design educators in America. So, Maurice.
Well, good afternoon. I am probably the newest Detroiter on the panel. I've been in Detroit for 24 months, in which time I've been given the awesome challenge of reinventing planning in the city of Detroit by hiring 30 new professionals. So we are a bit of a startup ourselves. And I couldn't be more honored to be a part of what is an extraordinary recovery story. And it has started, thanks to many of the people on this panel, at the very heart of the city, the downtown, the midtown, the riverfront. There's only one downtown, and usually those recoveries start at the heart. But there's also the soul of a city, and the soul of the city are many. And in Detroit, it's like 200 neighborhoods. And so my singular charge has been to nurture the soul of Detroit so that it can fully participate in the recovery. In the end, if you nourish the soul, inevitably the body will follow, which are those 700,000 people who are still here in Detroit, again, at the center of the metro area and Southeast. And we've got a lot of work to do, and there's been extraordinary progress that have been made. It has largely been the result of public-private foundation and community partnership. So I hope we'll be able to talk about what that looks like. But I really think we're all really excited about the place, about the little piece that we're playing in what I think is going to be one of the most equitable recoveries that American city has yet to see.
Fantastic, thank you. And last, we want to hear from Keith Owens. And Keith is a senior editor at the Michigan Chronicle. It's the state's oldest and most respected African-American publication. He has a long history in journalism, previously at the Free Press in Detroit. He's responsible at the Michigan Chronicle for all the editorial functions of the paper, also writes several articles a week, blog posts, and appears regularly in local and national media. Keith.
Well, thank you. Bit of my personal stories. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, and moved to Detroit in 1993. And I like to say when I moved to Detroit before it was sexy. And in addition to that, I came here from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was working in the newspaper there, and I moved to Detroit in January of '93. So I came from 77 degrees to 7. And so I am committed. And I think that, what is happening to Detroit, but also, and there was at the time when you moved to Detroit, and at the time when I went back home to visit my mother and go to church, and everyone was saying, why in the world? When are you coming back home to Denver? There was no belief, but I love Detroit then and I love it now. And because there's something about the city. I'm also a musician, so that says a lot to it, I think. And I learned more about Detroit almost as a musician than I did as a writer. And playing the clubs, I've been a musician about 30 years. But I think that what I see in Detroit, I know one thing we want to talk about, and I made a few notes, we'll make sure I don't run over, but was that in terms of what contributed to Detroit's revitalization, and I think there are a number of things, but just keep it brief so we can hold a discussion. One, I think, is that just the realization on a number of fronts that what should be obvious, that Detroit, the revitalization of Detroit is essentially the revitalization of Michigan. If Detroit goes down, you can forget it. Detroit is an anchor of the state. And I think that people begin to realize this is a very important part of the economy. And we don't want to lose that. So there was a sense of commitment from the grassroots on up to the corporate suites. And there are a lot of people coming together across really that this had to happen. But I think also it's important to realize that we hear a lot about the headlines of Detroit coming back and its revitalization, particularly in more recent years. And people need to understand that it wasn't as if all of a sudden everybody swooped in and nobody was doing anything before. You mentioned here with Sue Mosey. I think Sue Mosey is a lot of people's hero. Because Sue Mosey exemplifies the fact that overnight sensation of 30 years worth of work. And this has happened among there are a number of other groups in the city. There's Arise Detroit. There's so many other groups that have been working on the ground and keeping Detroit going, so that when the commitment was made to save it, there was something to save. And I think that many times the media has missed that and has gone to the people that once again are the sexy ones. But there are a number of organizations, people, individuals, et cetera, who've been doing a lot for Detroit for a long time. So that's what's I think is essential to realize in terms of revitalization. Also in terms of small businesses, Detroit's a city of entrepreneurs. And we know about the automotive industry and the music industry, but there's also the entrepreneurial spirit in Detroit is huge. And I just point to the fact that it's a blue-collar city, has been, probably will be for a long time. But also anybody who's been in Detroit for a long time understands that you can't, if you've lived in Detroit for a long time, you don't know where to go to fix your car, just ask your neighbor. Yeah. Or you need something else fixed, because everybody knows somebody, either their uncle, their brother, their father, their mother, somebody who worked at the plant. Their side job is fixing cars, repairing, building houses, something. That's the way the city is. So that's nothing new to Detroit. Everybody has a side hustle, side job, who knows how to do it, because that's just a survival thing in Detroit. Also, in terms of the number of small businesses, once again, talking about a lot of the focus on a lot of the large businesses that are there, but also people need to understand that Detroit has more than 32,000 black-owned businesses. And there have been for a long time. You're talking anywhere from hair salons to car repair to everything you want to name. But the problem is that it's much more difficult still for many black businesses to get the investment, to get the financing. But there's still, in order to employ more than one person. One thing, if I could just read real quick, if I'm able to do it, I want to make sure I don't go over. But something I had written a while ago, but it's just minorities in Detroit already account for 89% of the city's population. However, the firms they own account for only 15% of private company revenues. African American owned businesses account for 94% of the city's minority owned business enterprises, yet few of these companies grow enough to hire even one employee. Only 1 in 30 African American companies in the city has at least one employee compared to 1 in 3 white-owned businesses. So there are a lot of things that need to be adjusted. Also, we need to realize that Detroit is still the largest, most impoverished large city in the nation. You're talking about almost 40% of the population lives beneath the poverty line. About more than 47% are functionally illiterate in Detroit, which causes a problem for workforce development, which has been a problem in Detroit for a long time. So when I talk about revitalization, I think that, the median income in Detroit is $24,107. Nationally, it's more than twice that, $53,889. So I think that when we talk about Detroit's revitalization, the only thing I feel like everybody in this panel, committed to Detroit and believe it's going to happen. But I think we also need to be very cautious that the recovery is still very fragile. That if that too many more wrong moves could throw it right back in the wrong direction. So it's not like I'm not one of the ones who says Detroit is back, because it's not. Detroit is on its way back. And moves are being made, as Maurice talked about, many things are going for the neighborhoods, so many things are being done, investments being made, but it's not there yet. And if the wrong moves get made or certain things happen, it could go the wrong way, and it could still go the wrong way. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. But having said that, I do believe that we will get there. I've lived in Detroit, more than 20 years, and I've heard Detroit Renaissance almost every other year since then. And every time we're coming back, yeah.
This time we're
This time I believe it.
Thank you.
This time I believe it. Thank you.
So we've got business, nonprofit, government, and media. We have a reasoning for this order, why we're going in this particular order. And the theme of the panel is really about collaboration and collaborations across boundaries to get things done, because as our previous speaker said, it doesn't just happen by one company. It has to happen through collaborations. So I wanted to probe with the speakers about their insights on unique or creative partnerships between industry, entrepreneurs, citizens, the city of Detroit that have been successful, and what distinguishes the partnerships that work from the ones that don't. I'd like to start with Jerry, because they have something that I'm willing to claim is an amazing success. If you have been to Detroit since December, it is now the largest city completely lit by LED lights. They put up 64,000 street lights, and now places that have been dark for a generation are now lit up, and it's this really nice colored light. So I wonder if you could share the story about sort of the lights in Detroit.
Sure. Thanks, Jerry. When we talk about public and private partnership, I think that one really exemplifies it. And it really starts with great leadership. And we think that Mayor Duggan has just been a great leader for the city of Detroit, and he came at the right time for the city of Detroit to lead Detroit through its, startup of a metamorphosis and transformation. So about a week after he got elected, he called myself and our chairman, Jerry Anderson, to meet with him. And we sat down with him, and we were wondering what he would want to talk about. So we were kind of anxious about that since he was going into office. But we were also excited about the opportunity to meet with him. And so we were sitting down, and he looked at me and he said, "When are you going to start getting the lights up in the city of Detroit?" Because at that time, only 40% of the lights were working in Detroit. So it was a big problem from a public safety perspective, and just from being able to attract residents and retain residents. And so he, if you know the mayor, he's very straightforward, very plain speaking in terms of he tells you in the first 30 seconds what he's looking for. So my reaction to that was, we basically need the city to get out of the way, and then we can start putting the lights up. He said, well, tell me more. What does that mean? Well, we started describing that we had lots of meetings and more meetings and more meetings, and I said, we've been meeting with the city for 2 years, and we haven't put a single light up yet. You need to kind of clear some of the underbrush to let us start moving. And it was really a governance issue and a leadership issue. So he says, well, give me 30 days. And so, and I thought, yeah, right, okay, I've heard this story before. But 30 days later, he had us rolling, and we started putting up lights. And we were putting up about, we were putting up about 300 lights, city, full lamps and poles, 300 a week. So we were moving. And the relighting in Detroit actually set a record in the nation of how quickly a city was relamped. But a better part of the story too was that we were looking to put more lights up and use traditional technology like high pressure sodium, which is yellow. If you ever see street lights that are yellow, and he says, no, I don't want that for the city of Detroit. I said, I want the best lights for the city of Detroit. We said, Mayor, but we don't have enough money to cover all. He says, you all are going to need to figure that out. That's not my problem, that's your problem. So we did. We got creative, and we relit the whole city with LED lights. And as a matter of fact, I wish I had it with me, but there's a photograph from an astronaut that actually took a picture of southeast Michigan, and you can see Detroit as this bright LED lighting compared to the rest of the southeast Michigan, which is more of this yellow type of lighting. So pretty cool. It was a pretty cool public and private partnership that I know that we're really proud of. And the cool part is we got to do it twice, once in 1849 and this time in 2010.
And that's pretty long-term orientation, because the LED, they last forever.
Yes.
And they're very energy efficient. They're costly to start, but it takes a really long-term view to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's where the mayor was. He was saying, I want the best for Detroit. I want it to be better than what other communities have. And by the way, he said, I want you to start in the neighborhoods. I don't want you to start downtown. Downtown is fine from a public safety perspective. Actually, downtown Detroit is one of the safest districts probably in the country. Neighborhoods were experiencing a lot more violence, a lot more public safety issues, so he wanted the neighborhoods to be relit first. And that was a very strong message that he was sending to the community. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you. So Sue, you've got lots of examples. You've got de-electricity, you've got the Strathmore. What's your favorite example of a partnership?
Well, there's plenty of real estate partnerships, but I'm going to talk about something that you may not be quite as aware of that I think has had a huge impact on the city in the last 5 years or so, including now also being the pilot or sort of a framework for work that's now moving out into the city neighborhoods. So a number of years ago, a number of the national and local foundation community sort of figured out that Detroit did not really have a robust system of what are called community development finance institutions. And they are large national players of capital that use big foundation dollars and other kinds of capital, national funding dollars from the national government and many others, banks, and we really didn't have a robust system of these financial institutions really operating in Detroit. And we didn't even know what we were missing, quite frankly, because we had a few locals that were very effective with much smaller scale dollars, but we didn't really have real estate and charter school dollars, real estate dollars, health clinic dollars in big numbers to be able to really reach some scale in Detroit. So Kresge Foundation, Ford Foundation, a lot of the nationals invited us to sort of lead a national initiative, one of 5 cities, where they married us up with a large national development finance institution called Capital Impact Partners. And with them then came 4 others following that. Ford Foundation basically said, we want you to go work in Detroit. So IFF and Enterprise and all the big national players. And they were being directed by the national foundations to go spend their investment and grant dollars in the city of Detroit and to be a part of that revitalization. And it wasn't at the expense of our local CDFIs. They were also receiving lots of funding from the same sources. So all of a sudden, Detroit had a lot of dollars for actual real estate development and small business development that it never had. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars with all of these PRIs and government funding coming in for very specific kinds of projects, mixed income housing, mixed use development, some small placemaking projects, land use and green infrastructure projects. So all these different types of programs that are essential to revitalizing districts and neighborhoods that really wasn't really available in Detroit. So with that partnership and that strong message and those CDFIs all working together collaboratively so that they were not they were not all competing for those customers and loans. They were all working together. They oftentimes came in together to make all these capital stacks work. And it's created a very long-term, lasting, trusting partnership of capital purveyors that all want to see Detroit be successful, that I think that's going to have a very long-term impact on the city.
Thank you. Maurice.
Oh my, what can I talk about with regard to an innovative partnership? Given the focus on neighborhoods and the recovery of neighborhoods, Mayor Duggan first charged me to get as far away from downtown as possible and produce a neighborhood recovery story that would not have all of the traditional tools that you might have by being adjacent to downtown, Corktown, the riverfront, Brush Park, and let's see what we can do. So I surveyed many neighborhoods in Detroit and chose the Livernois-McNichols area, which again above 6 Mile in the west, in large part because it had some of the traditional anchors, 2 institutions of higher learning, Detroit Mercy and Marygrove College. It has an extraordinary diversity of housing and incomes in a 5 square mile area. It also, however, had some of the challenges that traditional neighborhoods in Detroit see, where you have an erosion of the residential fabric of those neighborhoods through vacancy and blight. So we zeroed in on a 1/4 square mile between Marygrove and Detroit Mercy, where the city owned 400 parcels out of the 1,200 parcels in that 1/4 square mile. And we imagined how you could go into that area, remove all blight. So what it would be like in Detroit to walk through your neighborhood and not see blight. What if we could go in and renovate every single house that was vacant? And there were some 115 houses. And what if we could create a garden or a purpose for every single vacant lot in that neighborhood, which accounts to about 20 acres, and do it all within 24 months with a single community developer in partnership with higher ed, philanthropy, and the residents who are still there, which are about 600 households. I am happy to announce that we found a developer who was interested in doing this. We have an unusual partnership. And so the unusual partnership is the city helped create this strategy. But it's going to be a partnership between young enterprise and established development capacity and the foundation community and the city. So the story, and it's already been announced, that the 2 young men who are leading this redevelopment strategy have been in Detroit for about 24 months. They came here seeking opportunity the way so many young people have. They're in their mid-30s, and they started renovating houses, one at a time, a half a dozen, all concentrated on a single block. And so they started to build some capacity to do this, and to do it in a way which was equitable and respectful for the families that were there. They partnered with an established development company, The Platform, led by Peter Cummings, who took these young entrepreneurs under his wing to give them the leverage and capacity to be able to respond to a request for proposals of this magnitude. So, so what you have are the largest transfer of publicly owned parcels in this administration, 400 parcels in a single neighborhood to this development partnership. The last part of that is philanthropy, the role that philanthropy played. A partnership between Rockefeller, Kresge, Knight, and JPD came together to build the public infrastructure to support that idea. So there will be 50 parcels that were formerly residential that will be collected into a 2-acre central park in the neighborhood. Philanthropy is bringing that to bear, and a greenway that will connect Marygrove College to Detroit Mercy through this neighborhood. So random parcels that are strung together in a walking, biking, linear park. So literally it took philanthropy, the entrepreneurial spirit of new Detroiters, partnering with established development entities, with 2 institutions of higher learning to transform this quarter square mile. And I think it could not have happened in any other way. It also, I must admit, had deep, deep engagement. It took the city about 12 months and about 50 meetings with the 600 households for them to completely embrace this strategy that essentially builds nothing but transforms everything at the same time and retains 100% of the people who are there now.
Thank you.
I'd say on a personal note, I'd really just co-sign with what Jerry talked about with the lights, simply because I live in the city in Detroit, in Boston Edison, which is a great neighborhood, but we also live next to a neighborhood that's still struggling. And we used to have, for the longest, the light in front of our house was out, and the lights all along Claremont were out. So when the crew came out and were putting up the light in front of our house, we were literally out on the front porch clapping, and went up and applauded, talked to the guy, and then we came out and wanted to shake his head, said thank you so much. So, and we weren't the only ones. I mean, people were just that glad to see lights coming on. So that's one. On a broader level, I think it was 2-3 years ago, Arise Detroit, which is another great neighborhood organization, which is kind of an umbrella organization which focuses largely on the neighborhoods. But Kresge and Skillman and another large foundation showed up at that meeting, and one thing that they committed to was providing funding for the neighborhood organizations there. And I thought that was tremendous, simply because it wasn't a matter of them of telling the neighborhoods this is what we're going to do for your neighborhood. We're going to do, but because like I said, Detroit is a city of neighborhoods, and the neighborhood organizations are very strong in Detroit, very. And I think that to be able to work, to come in there and to listen to them and to work with them, but also be able to have the funding there to help them achieve what they want to do in the neighborhood. Of course, Maurice was doing that also on the civic level, but I think that was an example of partnership that was very good, and also helped to lay a level of some trust as well. Then that there was that they wanted to work with the people there who they knew, because people in the neighborhood already knew a lot of what they wanted. The people who live in the neighborhood know what they need. They don't need somebody to come and tell them what they need. They know what they need. So I think that was a good example of that.
Well, thank you. I want to pick up on a theme and throw it open to everyone here. The theme that's come up in all of the commentaries has been about the role of neighborhoods. So if you don't know Detroit, it's 140 square miles. You could fit Manhattan, Boston, and San Francisco in the footprint of Detroit. Detroit is a very, very big city with a lot of neighborhoods. And the development, the revitalization has been really pretty uneven between downtown, midtown, Corktown, and other areas. One of my former doctoral students said, it's great that you're hanging around in where you are, but this isn't going to work if it's only within 3 blocks of Woodward. That's not going to count as a success. As Maurice has said before, 700,000 people have stuck with it through thick and thin. It's not just the new arrivals. So what can be done to make sure that the people who have stayed with the city are able to participate in the gains? How do we make sure that all the neighborhoods get covered? This is for whoever wants to dive in.
Okay. Well, I think part of it has been when you do have a city this large, the need to focus could not be overstated. Focus, 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 and partly why there is a recovery story to tell is because it was focused on a 7.2 square mile area, which was the heart. And again, it belongs to everyone. So it's not exclusive. If you ever spent a Saturday morning on the riverfront, you will see the cross-section of the region enjoying that space. Everyone feels it belongs to them. The question is, when you move into the other 132 square miles, how do you begin to prioritize where to start? Well, I think good urban practice would suggest you start from your strengths. You start from the neighborhoods which are the most complete and intact, and you work your way out from there. And so a counterintuitive act that Mayor Duggan did when he devised the demolition program or the blight removal program, he actually started from the neighborhoods that had the strongest area population. And then you would see 1 or 2 or 3 houses beginning to kind of dot those areas. And he immediately understood that that population has the wherewithal to leave. So that if you don't remove those things from these gorgeous neighborhoods, they could spread. And so, in effect, the areas where the most blight removal has occurred has had the largest real estate increase across the city. So you start from your strength. I think you also have to look at what are the assets in those neighborhoods. Often the single-family housing was the largest asset, an extraordinary, I mean, Detroit has hundreds of streets that are gorgeous single-family streets which anchor those neighborhoods. But then what do you do in a neighborhood? I mentioned Fitzgerald, there were 25 acres in a quarter square mile. Well, just south of where you live, Keith, is the Rosa Parks Claremont area. There are 50 acres of vacant land there. And that area, the Rosa Parks Claremont, is anchored by Henry Ford Hospital, which is 800,000 square feet. And there are easily another 100 homes that are vacant. So how do you go into an area there where those 100 homes, if everyone were rehabbed, and that 800,000 square feet were rehabbed, you would absorb any possibility of anything new for many, many years to come. So how do you turn that on its head and look at those 50 acres as the single largest asset to remake that neighborhood, whether it's urban agriculture or reforestation, something that genuinely changes the look, the feel, the perception of those neighborhoods. So what I have begun to do with my team is to focus on 7 geographies. All of them basically touch the borders of the city, so they are far from the downtown, and we are going to focus all of our resources in those areas that are the most populated. Our resources in trying to figure out how people should move through those neighborhoods relative to mobility, the look of their commercial corridors. How do you create a kind of main street, locally serving shopping areas to serve these single-family neighborhoods? How do you include or add the missing middle density housing that was not built in Detroit, the duplexes, the quadruplexes, the row houses, the townhouses? And how do you create a meaningful open space network. So my job is pretty much set for the next 5 years of bringing back those concentrated areas. And by the way, if we do that, we will have brought back at least 50 of the 200 neighborhoods that reside outside of the downtown core. And I could go on about what you do in the areas that are the least populated, but I'll stop there.
And I could talk a little bit about how I think adjacent neighborhoods to the downtown are the neighborhoods where a lot of energy and investment should be made, because they're the areas that are benefiting from the market that's actually moving into the city, and the real estate values that are increasing, and amenities that are coming in, and the transit that are coming in. And we're already seeing that organically happen in neighborhoods like the North End. I believe we're going to see that happen over by Henry Ford Hospital in those neighborhoods. Boston Edison, I love that neighborhood, and I feel like that's a neighborhood that's already doing fairly well. The real estate values are increasing, lots of people are moving there, but I'm sure it still needs a little bit of care and feeding there too on some basic, there's no commercial there. So even there, if there was a commercial strategy that really was developed for a portion of Boston Edison, I think the type of benefits from that, from stabilization, retention of people for longer periods of time, so that whole kind of corridor between Boston Edison, the Herman Kiefer, Henry Ford, I think is and the North End, I think is a huge next opportunity for Detroit, and much of it will, I believe, happen organically, but I still feel that that's a neighborhood where could be a lot of good interventions also made and have some real success in Detroit.
Something I'd want to add also, I think it's important, piggybacking on what both of you said, in terms of the areas that are still having difficulty, I think that you hear a lot about wraparound, and I think that when you're talking about some of the areas where, and you heard some of the statistics I mentioned before in terms of what Detroit is up against in terms of poverty level and everything else, and you're talking, and also we need to talk about the schools. You know, because Detroit and the schools, that needs to be so much done. So we talk about people moving to a neighborhood, but if it's not, two things keep people from moving to a neighborhood: if it's not safe and if the schools aren't there. And right now the schools are still struggling. So I think that has to be addressed before the neighborhoods get stabilized. And also you have to deal with the situations that people are going through. I think that, without taking up too much time with everybody, with all those things, with the problem with education, with the problem with access to services, et cetera, you need to, another thing is also, Detroit has been known for a long time in terms of home ownership. For a long time, it had the largest level of African-American home ownership in the nation for years. This just recently now has changed where that's no longer true. Detroit now has more renters than homeowners, and largely because of what has happened with the devastation economically. People losing their jobs, et cetera. I mean, I used to work at the Wayne County Treasurer's Office. Foreclosures, et cetera, people were losing their homes. So now folks who used to own no longer own. And so there need to be things done there as well. I mean, there's also more in terms of sale. Almost nobody can still at this point still to sell your home and make a profit still next to impossible in Detroit. Because most homes are underwater. Even nights because of everything that's going on. So most of the sales that are going on in Detroit now, and Crane's Detroit had an excellent article on this. But what it said was that the vast majority, I can't remember the percentage, but the vast majority of home sales in Detroit now are cash sales, not mortgages, cash. And the average cash transaction is $30,000. The average mortgage is about $155,000. So you understand that most homes are being sold in the neighborhood, and for $30,000. I mean, the person that lives next door to us in our house has a beautiful 3-story red brick home, bought it for $30,000. Beautiful. I mean, in Denver, that thing would cost $2 million easy. Because so. What that does to stability of a neighborhood, once again, in terms of property values, is that that change. So there's a lot of things going on that, in terms of stabilization, that also need to be done to bring around the whole city.
In our work, we touch everybody, right? So we're in the neighborhoods, we're downtown. So our people, including me, have spent a lot of time in the neighborhoods of Detroit. And one thing that we've come to understand is that what caused, I would say, the decline in the neighborhoods in Detroit over many, many years, through starting in the 50s and many waves thereafter, was the lack of employment, right, and access to employment. So when we started to think about that, that's what creates blight, right? People can't stay in their homes, so they leave their homes, and then the homes remain empty because there's no one else with a job to go in there to take that house. And so as you start stepping back from that, you say, well, what's the barrier to employment? So a group of regional CEOs, our chairman actually assembled them, so GM, Henry Ford, Quicken Loans got together and started talking about, well, we are the employers, right? The biggest employers in the city of Detroit. So how do we start creating access to employment? So when you start peeling that onion back, what you start to find is, well, geez, you know, the first problem is, could be education. All right, so then how do we as a group of corporations start to influence policy to create a better education system for the residents of Detroit? And start to use our philanthropic contributions as well as our leadership influence to do that. Then you say, well, transportation is an issue. Well, why is transportation an issue? Well, auto insurance is too expensive. So how do we work on that? So the corporations are starting together and start trying to influence that. Then you say, well, geez, you know, there's not really any trade schools that can train these employees effectively. So for example, Randolph School in Detroit can house 700 students. But today, I think less than 300 students, maybe less than 200 students are attending that school. And all the equipment and all the labs are outdated. The teachers that, the school system can't afford qualified electricians and mechanics and millwrights to go in those schools. So the corporate community is getting behind that school, to rebuild that school and outfit it so that we can start creating a flow. So I think from our perspective, if we can create a demand and a pull for employment and then work on all the upstream issues that prevent Detroit from accessing those jobs, it's going to be a long journey, but we've started. And I feel really good about that. I think the biggest impact we can have on the Detroit neighborhoods, if we want all Detroiters to share in the comeback of Detroit, the best way to do that is to create employment opportunity for that comeback. And I think that's something that we're going to work really hard on as corporate partners.
Well, thank you. So it's great to hear about these cross-sector collaborations and the ways that businesses, nonprofits, the city are trying to take into account sort of the diversity across the neighborhoods. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about entrepreneurship and the ecosystem of sort of starting up new enterprises, for-profit, nonprofit. One of the things that struck me about Detroit is it feels like the most collaborative entrepreneurial environment I've ever seen. So I lived in Silicon Valley for a few years. In Silicon Valley, everybody's waiting for you to fail. And it feels like in Detroit, everybody's pulling for you to succeed. If you open up a restaurant next door to another restaurant, they'll stop in, order a meal, tell you about their best suppliers, lend you some pots and pans when you get started. It feels like something I've never seen anywhere else is this remarkably supportive entrepreneurial ecosystem. So am I tripping about that, or is this actually, it just feels remarkable that it's like people are welcoming you and pulling for you to succeed and make that happen. And I wonder, what is it about Detroit that provides a sort of welcoming environment for entrepreneurs? I think Sue is an example. You know, you make it easy for people to open up businesses in Midtown, but I wonder if you guys could say some words about that.
Well, I do think it is a real thing in Detroit. I mean, there is enthusiasm like you wouldn't believe amongst folks for opening up businesses, and not just young folks, I mean, older folks too. People really, I mean, part of it is people just really are feeling inspired and they really want to participate in the recovery of Detroit. And so part of it is passion. Not everybody's making a lot of money. I'm just going to be honest. But I mean, they are meeting a lot of good people. They're forming lifelong relationships. They're having a lot of fun. They're learning new things, and they're owning their own businesses, and they're in charge of their kind of their world, and they're creating employment opportunities, sometimes for family or friends. And so that's driving an awful lot of the goodwill and excitement around what's going on. I will say that this has also been very heavily supported for quite a few years now by a lot of infrastructure that's been set up in the city from the foundation community, all kinds of institutes and retail boot camps and Goldman Sachs' program. All of these are here. Most of them are free for folks to, hop into a 6-week or an 8-week course, completely immerse yourself. There are these CDFIs have been funded with dollars to give you startup capital funds or, lines of credit or inventory. So there are people people like us in the neighborhoods that are helping find you locations and brokering deals and reviewing your leases so you don't get in trouble, and putting you next to like-minded other businesses where maybe you can share some customer base. And so there's a huge amount of that going on all over in all kinds of districts across the city, and that really is a real dynamic in Detroit. There's also some very good programs the city set up with a foundation called Motor City Match, which many people have access to all over the city, that have made a lot of people, made the difference in the funding capital for people to really go out there and feel that they too can open a business in the city. So it's been very effective. And we have found through a lot of surveys we've been doing of our local businesses that it's a much higher percentage of those businesses hiring City of Detroit residents than you're going to find in general. So, we're up to, JP Morgan Chase did a study that showed only 26% of the jobs in Detroit were going to Detroiters. Our recent scan was something like almost 60% of our micro district of all employees under 500 were hiring Detroit residents. So that's over a double jump in that percentage, and we have a goal to further increase that by opening hiring halls and doing other things in the neighborhood that just make it easier for businesses to actually intentionally try to hire more Detroit residents. So if we can get a lot more people doing that, you can create a lot more local employment opportunities.
I would say Detroit also, this entrepreneurial spirit is contagious. People see from the outside, they see a community that has grown incredibly resilient, necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. Literally, people have had to make things work, and so you find some risk-taking that you couldn't take as a young person in other cities. You can take it here. So I have a 28-year-old planner who came from New York, was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. He now works for the planning department. He bought his first home at 28, 2 years out of graduate school. That you could not have that in so many other American cities. So I hope that the low real estate values will assure that one of the things that we will be able to boast for a very long time is affordability. And I think that will attract and retain talent. There's a young entrepreneur who left a bigger city and came and was able to buy, a series of lots in an area on the west side. He now has amassed 3 acres, and he said, I want to get into providing really unique housing, and he has this idea of the Kwanzaa huts, these prefabricated barreled structures, and he found himself an incredible architect, and he started building them, and lo and behold, they won a national award, and they were on the cover of architectural magazines, and he's 33 years old. He came here, he had a vision, and it could be done just because of that same quantity of land and this sense that anything is possible here. And so I think that the resiliency of having been left has created a sense of risk-taking, willingness. No one else is coming to help, so we got to figure this thing out. And it's just kind of wonderful to come into a community that seems to be so open to invention and so welcoming that someone like myself, who's a newest Detroiter, could thrive here.
I would say too, I think if talking about, and I agree with what everyone has said, but I think also if you want to get a sense of the spirit in Detroit, just look at the t-shirts. Yeah. Detroit hustles harder. Pardon my language, bitch, I'm from Detroit. Shirts. But Detroit is a tough town, yeah. And I think that, but in a good way as well as a bad way, and I think that now it's a thing that and getting back to the youth, young people like challenge, and so being able to say, hey, I made it in Detroit, You know, don't tell me about you made it in Denver. That doesn't bother me. I made it in Detroit, and I think that some young people, when I was, musicians, comments like it's the same thing in Detroit. You can play anywhere, but when I play anywhere outside, I tell the other musicians, I play in Detroit. The waters part, because they know they know the history. They know the name, Detroit, and I think that now that history of toughness is really playing, to our advantage, and that people really want to come back and just say, hey, I can do it here. This is Detroit. And I can tell people I made it here. That has a lot to do with it, I think.
So if I can summarize, what I'm hearing is that Detroit is a welcoming, wonderful culture for entrepreneurs, that if you're a young person in your 20s and 30s, Detroit has a long runway, affordable housing, you can do your own thing, your neighbors are going to collaborate with you, and there's a lot of funding sources. Is that the punchline that I'm...
You could always use more funding sources.
I would be remiss if I didn't give mad props to Peter Allen, who's sitting in the second row, who also teaches a wonderful pro bono real estate class for residents of Detroit, where he's taking people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and doing a free boot camp for people to develop real estate in their own neighborhood. So he's taking people on their weekends, coming after work to sort of buy the house next door, fix it up, make it livable. So thank you, Peter, for that. University does have a handful of pretty good partnerships with Detroit, keeping up on that theme of partnership. The last thing I'd like to raise, or maybe the second to last thing I'd like to raise, is about sort of the cultural amenities in Detroit. So you don't just live by entrepreneurship alone, you also live by the things that make life worth living in the neighborhood. And one of the things I've found remarkable about Detroit is just the number of amazing sort of festivals and free events going on any given occasion. So I'm going to tell you all, look up D-Electricity and make sure you're in Detroit September 22nd and 23rd. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about sort of the cultural amenity. This is the most, I have to say, this is one of the highlights of my existence, was visiting this. You have to go there this September. All of Midtown becomes an outdoor art gallery with these amazing videos and sculptures and dances, and the churches have music going on, and it's just this giant open-air art festival that goes on till late, and you see families, you see kids, teenagers, college students, old people like me, all sort of hanging out together, getting along, and having this amazing, great time. And then, the week after that, it might be Dally in the Alley. It's just sort of remarkable. So it's a chance to quell, if you would, about sort of...
Well, I think that Detroit does have a huge history of festivals, always has, going back to all the ethnic festivals that used to be on the river that were very well attended and really iconic in the city. And now we have world music festivals and events that are also highly regarded and happen in the neighborhood. We are very committed also that, arts and culture be a part of, what people enjoy about the neighborhood that we work in. We do a couple of very large scale events that are all free to the public, that involve all kinds of local, regional, national, international artists coming together to do some really amazing work, but to use the whole neighborhood as sort of the backdrop. And the key thing is, like you said, free access for everyone, something for everyone, and yet high quality and stimulating, interesting activity in the neighborhood. And we also have a small concert park and news center that we do all free access programming all summer for the neighborhood residents as well. And we're really remain committed to that as being part of, again, what we can offer to the whole city as sort of a wonderful celebration of the arts. So,
and Jerry, if I could, DTE has been an incredible supporter of every flavor of nonprofit enterprise, cultural, educational. I wonder if you could say a little bit about your theory there.
I was going to build on something that Sue said, is the Detroit Riverfront, which we were a big supporter of getting that going and rebuilt. If you haven't gone there, you should really go. Pick a nice summer day. It's a great place just to go for a walk with someone. Sometimes they say the best things in life are those things that are free, and that really is a beautiful waterfront. Huge transformations undertaken there. I was there with my wife a couple of weeks ago, and we've done this at least a handful of times in the last year. And you just go there on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, and you can walk right to the one end to the other, and the reward on either end is if you like beer, there's some good cold beer pubs along the way. So that's always fun, and you can have a nice lunch. Then there's the DeQuinder Cut. If you want to bike, if you're a bicyclist or like to bicycle, you can take the riverfront as well as go up the DeQuinder Cut, which takes you into the Eastern Market area and north of there. So pretty cool place, and urge you to go if you get the chance. And what you'll see, I think Keith mentioned it, Maurice, is the amount of ethnic diversity that's there. Just wonderful, just makes you feel good. So it's a really good feeling to do that. The other thing I'll close on is that we're in the process of investing in a park just next door to our facility. And it's going to be somewhat similar to Campus Martius. We're going to anchor it with a restaurant, and a local restaurateur is going to operate that restaurant. And it's also going to be programmed by the Detroit Downtown Partnership, and they'll program all kinds of festivals and concerts at this park. So we're excited about it for our employees. I think our employees will love it, but I think all the residents of Detroit and the suburbs are just I think it's going to be another really great place to gather as a community. So we're pretty excited about that too.
One thing I would like to say too, I'm thinking, if there's any frustration that I have, I think a lot of Detroiters have, is that we don't promote the things we have culturally as much as we should. I mean, I think if there's one thing I would say if I was one writing advertising, which I'm not, I would just say, Detroit, you would never believe it. The things that Detroit, for those who don't know, Detroit literally is the music capital of the world. There is no other city, not New Orleans, not Austin, nowhere, that has the depth of musical talent and history than Detroit does. And it has produced, anything from techno to jazz to blues to rock to anything you name across the board, no other city. And yet we don't promote it as much. Other many you go to Memphis, the rest of them they promote it, you think they really, created the round wheel. But Detroit got there before everybody. Then we've got the DIA, one of the most remarkable museums in the country. And we've got local artists. Here, and the history of local art in Detroit is unbelievable. In terms of the artists, what they produce, how long they produce, the level of art that's there. The concerts. We've got everything from, like I said, Dally in the Alley to the Detroit Jazz Festival, the largest free jazz festival in the world. And also, I would say, as a musician, that one of the few jazz festivals that can really call itself a jazz festival. Many jazz festivals, you see Snoop Dogg, and I love Snoop, but he doesn't belong at a jazz festival. But there's anything from that to the Motown Hoedown's not there as much, but there, techno, to you name it, and all these huge festivals. Anywhere else you go, they can't have those festivals because they don't have that depth. Detroit has lost more great talent in the last year than most cities ever had. It's just.
Last night I was at Baker's Lounge on Livernois, listening to a local band. It was pretty extraordinary, and it's just there for you. If those of you who are here in the first week of June, Aretha Franklin will be giving a free concert in downtown, an outdoor concert. And it just goes on and on. I think about the latest diverse communities that have come to Detroit. The Bangladeshi community north of Hamtramck have an incredible cultural festivals now. You can go to Southwest and Mexican Town, and again, immerse yourself in the Latino traditions of culture. It's everywhere. And I think the more diverse and more cosmopolitan Detroit becomes, the richer the cultural offering. So I'm particularly interested in how it translates when you go into neighborhoods and begin to see that kind of diversity emerge.
Baker's is the nation's oldest jazz club, by the way.
Incredible if you have not been there.
And just so you know, I want to make clear that neither Ted Nugent nor Kid Rock is actually from Detroit. They're from the suburbs.
We claim them all.
Dilla, White Stripes, okay. So we're at the end of our time. I just want to say to those of you that didn't raise your hand at the beginning, now is your chance. Tonight, Friday night, Saturday night, make it into Detroit, come and visit some of these things, stay at the Inn on Ferry Street, use some DTE power, read local newspapers. And I'd like to thank our panelists for being part of this really wonderful session. It's made me very enthused about the city.
Yes, we have a very small, but hopefully meaningful little momentum to say thank you. But this did not disappoint. It was a wonderful way to end the day of formal presentation. So thank you, Keith. Thank you.
Loving the sketchbook.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And we'll stick around for a few minutes if people have some questions or want to come up and learn how to start a business or invest in one in Detroit.
We just want to alert you to what's coming up. We have a magnificent dinner that's going to be at the Art Museum, and so we ask you to leave here, hover, meet, talk to people, and then at 6:45 you will know, because you'll see there's a lot of people. We're going to stroll together over to the galleries, and you'll have a chance to eat really fabulous food, because we do fabulous food here, and stroll to some of the open galleries. So please join us.
Yep, so just a reflection, what we promised this morning, just to remember, that our goal was to stretch your imagination about the possibilities of positive business and provide some tools and strategies that you can take back with your organization. So hopefully we've delivered on that today. We've got you thinking about some new ideas. We've talked a lot about purpose, culture, community, collaboration, and it only gets better tomorrow. So come back tomorrow, we'll have a great time, and we'll see you at dinner tonight.